Okay, well, thank you everyone. And tonight we are holding a public hearing for a proposed cultivated oyster mariculture site in Matagorda Bay. So the purpose of this public meeting is to provide information about cultivated oyster mariculture, and in particular this site that is in Matagorda Bay, and answer any questions on the proposed site. Plus give instructions on how to submit your public comment. TPWD permits the activity of cultivated oyster mariculture. A lot of times I will be shortening this to the acronym COM. There are two types of permits: grow-out sites, and which are often called farms, where oysters are grown to market size, and nursery hatchery facilities that produce and grow oysters in their juvenile stage. All of our oysters gear for mariculture must be off-bottom mariculture. Applicants nominate their own sites and conduct a natural resource survey. The term is 10 years for each of these, and only the eastern oyster from Texas broodstock are allowed in mariculture. Here are three common types of gear. You're not necessarily limited to these gear, but these are the common types of gear that you may see. We have our floating bags. So it's a rigid mesh bag that attaches to a long line, and oysters are in that bag. Then next we have floating cages. So these floating cages are larger hardwire structures that contain smaller versions of these floating bags. They'll have floats on them. So when the cage side is up with the oysters out, that's called the desiccation position. That's dries up any biofouling algae and then allows things like little crabs and things to drop out. And then most commonly you'll see those in what they call the feeding position. So the floats are on top of the water here, and the oysters are in the water filtering and feeding. Another type of off-bottom gear is an adjustable longline system. This is where there are poles and they have clips or hooks to hold a line at different positions, and along that line there are floating baskets, and that line is moved up and down in the water column as needed. So the line can be moved up out of the water for that desiccation, the normal feeding position just below the top of the water, and then lower it down in case of any sort of storm to protect those oysters. An annual fee is paid based on the size of the proposed site, and before activities may begin, other authorizations are needed from other agencies such as the Texas General Land Office, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the U.S. Coast Guard. We do have an active use criteria that means that a certain amount of oyster seed must be stocked per year to show that the site is actively being used. Year-round harvest is allowed. However, you must comply with all the Texas Department of State Health Services regulations. And just really quickly on some of those regulations, for our grow-out site, for example, must be in waters classified as approved or conditionally approved for oyster harvest. And so this is determined by the Department of Health, and they sample the bodies of water along Texas for various contaminants and for various reasons. But this monitoring, based on the results of those, they classify the water bodies for the harvest of molluscan shellfish, in our case, oysters. And these are also based on federal parameters. These classifications do not have any impacts on other recreation, access, or other activities. That's just a classification about harvest of, in particular, oysters. And TPWD is not involved in those water body classifications, but you can find out more information on this at the Texas Department of Health website, and in specific, their seafood and aquatic life group. So tonight we are looking at proposed site that would be number G-0022. It is a grow out site located in Matagorda Bay, which is Shellfish Harvest Area TX16. These are approved waters, and it's proposed 5 acres. Here's kind of the vicinity. So we're over down in Matagorda Bay, Matagorda County, and then within the larger bay, the red star indicates the site location, and then a closer in of that, there are other mariculture sites nearby. Ones in green are fully permitted, and then the ones in yellow are ones that have conditional permits. The proposed route for this site is leaving from Palacios Harbor and driving out to the site. For our operations plan, they propose to use floating cage as gear, and the anchor and main lines are 1/2-inch blue steel rope. Their proposed anchored are 60-inch screw or auger anchors. And at each anchor point, there will be buoys indicating the anchor points. They will have 36 rows of cages, and within each row, there'll be 3 lines. And we're going to get to a diagram of that a little bit on the next slides. And they do plan to have a 40-foot wide working area in the middle of the rows, so 18 on either side. They propose corner markers will be determined as appropriate by U.S. Coast Guard, but they proposed having pilings on the 4 corner markers with the appropriate lights. And for bird deterrence, if needed, using flags, hawk or owl predator decoys, and the zip type ticklers on floats. So looking at our overhead site layout, you see all of these rows. This is the whole 5 acres. So within each row, there will be 3 lines of 3 main lines, and on those main lines, 13 to 15 cages each. And then this is the work area in between here, and next slide kind of gives that detail. So within the row here, you see the main lines, and each main line will have its own anchors, and they'll be along the road there, with spacing in between the lines within. Also, spacing on the main lines, cages are going to be spaced 3 feet apart. And not sure if it showed, in between each one of these rows are going to be spaced 20 feet apart. So on-site operation will be to access by boat daily, weather permitting, and all work will be done by boat due to the depth there. The floating cages will be flipped for desiccation, and resubmergent requirements prior to harvest will be met. The oysters will be tumbled and sorted as needed on the site on a vessel, and cleaning of cages will occur at a designated land location. As part of their plan, they do indicate that all non-organic waste produced at the farm, such as rope, zip ties, anything like that, will be collected on the boat and then taken to land to be disposed of. For the hurricane plan, before and during the season, they will continuously check their gear for wear and tear and replace as needed. If the site is within the cone of uncertainty for a storm 32 hours prior to landfall. They will sink their cages, and post-storm, they'll go, once it's safe to return, they will refloat, check their cages, their lines, their oysters, and anything assessed for damage and report. So here's a layout, the proposed site for the resource sample survey. They did all sediment sample grabs, and this is the diagram of what those sample spacings are, both within the site, a closer spacing, and in the 500-foot buffer. There were a total of 295 samples collected, and they used a PVC sample device similar to this one pictured here, where you have a larger PVC opening and then the pole to the top, and there is a valve to, once the pole is sunk into the sediment, you close that valve off, creating suction to bring up the samples. Depths range between 3.3 and 3.9 meters in the area. Composition was mud or mud with shell fragments, and those fragments are under 25 millimeter fragments, so not large intact shells. And here are some picture examples from those surveys, and there were no evidence of oyster habitat or seagrass indicated during the survey. So the next step for this proposed site, G-0022, is open for public comment. The deadline for public comment is September 25th of this year, and you will submit public comment to oyster.mariculture@tpwd.texas.gov. Once that public comment period is over, if there are any issues we need to address with public comment, we'll do so, and then a conditional permit is issued. Mariculture activity cannot begin when they have that conditional permit, but that's just saying that TPWD has reviewed, this meets all of our buffers and guidelines, and then they go gather their authorizations from the other agencies. Once those authorizations are secured, we will then review that they have those authorizations, and a final permit can be issued after the first year's annual fees are received. So again, open comment is till September the 25th, and you can submit it to the Oyster Mariculture. And if you need any more information about Oyster Mariculture, you can check our website out using this shortened address, bit.ly/Texas Oyster Mariculture. Okay, so we'll pause here and just give a minute or so. If you have questions, again, you click the Q&A button and you will type your question and we'll answer here. So just pause, allowing people to type questions if they have them. Okay, let me try that again, unmuted. So we don't see any questions now. If you are watching this recording later, or you think of questions later, you may email those to that Oyster Mariculture email address. Now I'll hand it back over to Holly for some final wrap up.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, please feel free to reach out at that Oyster Mariculture email address with any questions or comments. Again, you will be receiving that email from Zoom tomorrow at some point with that email address, as well as a link to our YouTube channel where this recording is going to be posted. Give us about 24 hours to get it up, and that link again to our Oyster Mariculture page. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you everyone so much for being here this evening. We appreciate it, and we'll see everyone next time. Bye, everyone.